You're listening to Shoot the Hostage. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Dan.
We're a movie-obsessed couple that delves into a different film each week based around a theme.
This season the theme is aliens, and we're covering 8 extraterrestrial-themed movies.
Shoot the Hostage contains explicit language and mature content, as well as major spoilers for the chosen film. We really hope you enjoy listening and stick around.
So, Halloween. This is technically our Halloween episode, so we're kind of doing a horror. I don't know if I would describe this as horror, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Sci-fi horror?
Yeah, I guess so. What are we talking about?
Lifeforce.
Directed by Tobe Hooper.
Yeah, first time watch for both of us.
Yes.
Potentially last time watch for both of us.
I reckon so, yeah. Spoil it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So we watched this fairly recently, and I don't really remember the movie, so I don't know how this is going to go.
So you guys are going to hear me talk for the next 45 minutes.
Well, I'm sure you'll say things and I'll think, oh yeah, the space bats, and then we'll just go off on a tangent or whatever. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be, because also it's horror, and horror is not really my genre. It's definitely your genre.
Why are we together again? Remind me.
Should we have this conversation off air? Do you
Perhaps, think? Yeah. Let's save it for the therapist.
Air our grievances.
Let's save it for couples counselling.
Yeah, okay.
Who are we kidding? We can't afford couples counselling. This is it.
Yeah, if you'd like to sign up to our Patreon,
yeah,
our Kickstarter for how much does couples counselling cost?
I have no idea.
Like 50 quid?
I think let's just continue this. Let's just hash it out as we go. Okay. So you're not a big horror fan. Well, you are and you're not.
I like good, well-made, and I'm not saying this isn't that.
You like pockets of horror.
I like I just like good films, and to me,
you like Driven.
Yeah, but I like that because it's cars. Like, there are things like action movies I can forgive a lot if there's not a very good movie, but the action's good. Similarly with car stuff. But horror, if it's just someone running around with a knife, I'm like, it doesn't really do anything for me. If there's not something else going on, like a Get Out or an Ari Aster movie or something like that, it's got to be more layered.
So you're an elevated horror guy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Because I'm better than you.
That's going to be very divisive. Yeah, well, similarly to what you've just said with the car thing and the action thing, like that's me for this genre, for horror.
Yeah.
I'm fine with a guy just running around with a knife for 90 minutes. That's cool. I'm all in. This isn't that, though.
No.
This is a very peculiar film. And before we dive in, do you want to do a little synopsis? Maybe to refresh your own memory.
Yeah.
Never mind anyone else.
Can't do any harm. Okay, so
Go on.
Straight to Letterboxd. Let's read a tagline first to get as much information as possible. In the blink of an eye, the terror begins. That's not very helpful.
No.
Right, so it's
that could be anything.
Okay, a space shuttle mission investigating Halley's Comet brings back a malevolent race of space vampires who transform most of London's population into zombies. The only survivor of the expedition and British authorities attempt to capture a mysterious but beautiful alien woman who appears responsible. I read that as reasonable. She doesn't appear reasonable.
She's very calm.
She doesn't appear responsible either. Oh, responsible for the alien. Right, okay. I was going to say,
she's a very responsible woman.
She's not even wearing a jacket.
In London, of all places.
Yeah, so this is a very weird mix of things. It starts in space. Yeah,
so basically, in my limited research for this show, I did read somewhere that the original director's cut was supposed to be a fair bit longer. Like, this was under 2 hours. The original director's cut, I believe, was about 2 hours, 8 minutes. Something like that. And a big chunk of what was cut was from the first act. So there was supposed to be a lot more on the spacecraft.
Okay.
Which I'm kind of gutted about, to be honest, because that was some of the most interesting stuff, I thought.
Yeah, I was definitely intrigued at the start.
Yeah.
I'm just looking on here on Letterboxd, it's 102 minutes. I think our one that we watched was just under 2 hours.
Yeah, it was longer than that. I think the one we watched was about an hour and 56 minutes.
Yeah, but there's another cut, you say, potentially.
Many more, apparently.
It's interesting because I listened to the Mick Garris, is it Postmortem?
Oh, yeah.
Podcast today, and it was after
Great podcast, yeah.
Hooper had died, and it was kind of in dedication to him. And he had a couple of other people on, actually the metal plate guy from Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. And,
Bill Moseley.
That guy. And Stretch, also from Texas
Caroline
Chainsaw.
Williams.
Yeah, there you go. But they were talking about a fair few things, and Mick Garris particularly mentioned some projects that Hooper had made, and they just got carved up and different scores were put on. I think he was specifically referencing a film called Gin when he was talking about.
Oh, yeah, that was one of his later ones.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I think that was sort of maybe mid to late 2000s. It came after Mortuary, which was fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But I've never actually seen Gin.
I haven't. I've got a really big hole in my Tobe Hooper filmography. I haven't seen a bunch of his stuff.
Yeah.
I think, Poltergeist for me is easily his strongest film. For me.
Yeah.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Go on.
I don't know. It's a bone of contention, isn't it, with film fans as to whether or not he deserved the directing credit for that, because it's so Spielbergian that, I mean, obviously as producer, Spielberg would have held a fair amount of authority on that set anyway. But I don't know, it doesn't feel like a Tobe Hooper film to me.
Well, I heard on the same podcast, they were talking about that very thing, because that's the thing that people, they always bring that up when they're talking about
people get stuck
Tobe
on
Hooper.
that.
Yeah, and I get it, because I watched Poltergeist and it feels very Spielbergian. Like you say, the music, Pinky Plonky family time music. And it's the family unit, and it just, there's lots of Stephen in it. But from what I heard, he was very hands-on on Poltergeist. He did have a lot of ideas and wanted to contribute. Now, it's tricky because is that really different from any other film? Because all films are a huge collaboration to a certain degree.
Yeah, but I would say there are definitely instances where producers are definitely more hands-off. Like a lot of them can just be the money people.
I think from what Mick was saying, Spielberg can be, very, very involved.
Mm-hmm. So he's a control freak, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, who knows? You're just a perfectionist. Who knows? I don't really know the guy very well. So we've only met once or twice. Gave me a stogie, so he's right by my book, yeah. I've never met him. I just want to qualify.
Yeah, sarcasm.
I don't think he even smokes. He may smoke, who knows?
We're not here to cast aspersions on Spielberg's character.
Yeah.
Just Tobe Hooper's.
No, but from what I heard, yeah, Spielberg can be very, very hands-on. In that case, in Poltergeist, maybe Tobe Hooper was quite welcoming of that. If I'm working for Spielberg and he's got ideas, I'm listening to him. It can only improve the project, which it did. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a similar case on the movie Used Cars they were talking about on that podcast, where Bob Zemeckis was the director, but Spielberg had a lot to contribute.
Right.
And Kurt Russell would turn around and said, who am I taking direction from? Bob Zemeckis or Steven Spielberg, choose. And apparently Spielberg went, yep, my bad, I'll leave it alone.
Okay.
So I just think that maybe Tobe Hooper, from the sounds of it, was just more open to just being more collaborative about it and didn't really fight it in the public, because I don't know, he seems like he was a kind of a reclusive guy and not very in the public eye. It's
funny you say that, because I know very little about him. Exactly. So I guess, that definitely backs up that theory. Mm. It was actually when like I said, my research for this show was more limited than we have done so far, but it was a bit more of a struggle to find interviews and information about him than it has been for any other show.
I did a podcast search for Tobe Hooper interviews, and I went back like 2014, and I couldn't find anything really. I'm sure stuff is out there and it does exist, but usually, if I'm looking for interviews with a director, there's loads, especially last few years where podcasts have really taken off. But yeah, I could find very little about the man. But when I saw that Postmortem had done an episode about Tobe Hooper, I thought probably a good one, because they're going to talk a lot about his life, and they did. And they touched on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, 2, and Poltergeist, and they spoke about that stuff, which we've mentioned. So that was really good. I would actually recommend listening to that one if you do want to know more about
I'm assuming
the man.
Garris probably knew him as well, because I know Masters of Horror was a Mick Garris brainchild, I think.
It sounds familiar.
And Tobe Hooper was responsible for one of the worst episodes of Masters of Horror.
Right. But
I don't know, I feel bad because you said like a lot of people speak really highly of him, and I feel like I'm just going to serve to shit on his legacy today because I'm not a fan.
Those 3 people spoke very highly of him.
Right.
I've not listened to any podcast with him in or know anything about him, so I'm going to reserve any judgment on that. From what I've heard, he seemed like he was a pretty cool dude, but who knows? And he's not here to defend himself, so
we can't be too harsh.
He's already dead. I'm not going to kick a man while he's down.
So you said you're not super familiar with his back catalogue, but you have seen a few, right?
Yeah, obviously.
We watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre together, like within the last year or two.
Yeah.
And I mean, that alone cemented his place among the horror greats, if you speak to any horror fan. So what are your thoughts about that one?
I respect it. I think it's a game changer.
That's very diplomatic.
Good movie. It is a good movie. It's not something I would sit down and choose to watch, but it's one of those where I respect I guess it's something that a lot of people come to, but I respect how graphic it feels
without actually being. Yeah.
And it's all in the details, in the sound design and what's in the frame and all of that stuff. So, and also just as a monolith of the horror genre and the industry in general, I guess in the 70s, that's just when slashers are starting to get off the ground, and that genre is picking up its own pace. I guess in the 60s you had Romero, and then if you have to pick one person per decade, 60s has got to be Romero, 70s maybe Tobe Hooper with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You wouldn't say Hitchcock for the 60s? That's controversial.
I've seen Rope, which was very good.
Wow. Okay.
What else have I seen? I'm not sure I've seen the original Psycho.
You've seen the Gus Van Sant Psycho, but not Hitchcock.
No,
Get out.
I haven't seen that.
Get out.
No. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Hitchcock. But there's a few people, but I definitely would put Tobe Hooper in that.
Yeah.
Purely for Texas Chainsaw Massacre and what it's done, and it definitely laid the groundwork for a lot of other films to follow and offshoots of that genre. And you see a lot of, I was going to say recent movies like The Devil's Rejects, which came out 25 years ago. But you see the influence in films like that.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, hugely.
Massively.
And it's been rebooted and remade and legacy sequels to this franchise. And people seem to love these movies, right?
I mean, look, the Texas Chainsaw films are of hugely varying quality, to my mind anyway, but they continue to be churned out, so they must be doing reasonably well. They're a lasting favourite amongst horror fans, so yeah, who am I to say? He definitely kickstarted something, didn't he?
Yes, but outside of Texas Chainsaw, Poltergeist...
I made you watch The Fun House.
Oh, that's right, yeah, Fun House. It
was really, that memorable.
Really crazy show where anything goes. I remember that one. Yeah, the circus, the circus one. I remember the circus, but I don't remember what I thought about it. I don't think I liked it very much.
I enjoy the Funhouse a lot, whilst also acknowledging that it's not a good film.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it's a very good film, and I don't think it's very memorable. It has moments, Gunther as the villain, but I think that's more to do with Rick Baker's effects work than Tobe Hooper's influence, shall we say. This is something we'll get into a little bit later, but I always have an issue with the performances in Tobe Hooper films. They feel too stagey, if that makes sense. They feel too theatrical, too big. And that made sense in the 70s, but it doesn't in the later films. Not to me, anyway.
Okay, so his style just didn't translate in modern movies as well for you?
Doesn't do a lot for me, no.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, we'll touch on that in a bit. So coming back to...
Space Bats?
To Space Bats, yes. Did you know anything about this film before going in? We kind of picked this one blindly because we wanted to do something horror adjacent for the Halloween show.
Yeah.
And we came up with this. And we thought it'd be fun because neither of us had seen it. And it felt like, as you say, a bit of a gap in our movie knowledge.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems to be, I don't want to say highly regarded, but a lot of people I know really enjoy it.
To answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know anything about it. I'd seen the cover and maybe I'd read a synopsis. I don't think I had, actually, because I think I would have been like, space vampires? All right, that sounds cool. Let's watch that 10 years ago. No, I don't think I really knew anything about it.
No.
And in fact, we very nearly didn't watch it because we were scrolling through Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah.
It just wasn't showing up on our search. So
Unless you paid for it.
Yeah, but we got around that anyway. Details.
Yeah. Sneaky Prime.
We didn't steal it. We still watched it on Prime. We still watched it on Prime, but I had to log into my account where it was showing.
Yeah.
Who would have guessed?
Prime Bezos just doesn't like me, apparently.
Yeah.
So this is a Canon Films production. Do you know much about them?
That's the studio that skimped on Masters of the Universe, is it not?
Well, it's funny you say
Superman
that.
4.
And Superman 4. It's funny you say skimped on because Superman 4, Masters of the Universe, and Lifeforce were their 3 biggest budget movies.
Right. They I believe they were meant to make a Spider-Man movie at one point.
Holy shit.
Which James Cameron may or may not have been attached to anyway.
That would still have been better than Spider-Man 3.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, I know about them because of Masters of the Universe, which is a really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently the story goes that the final action sequence of that movie is just a dark room with all of the lights off, and it's just close-ups of Lundgren and Skeletor fighting. But that was a result of the budget not having any money to do anything bigger than that. But it works fine for me. But Superman 4 is a big pile of shit.
Largely acknowledged to be, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record and say that it's a terrible movie.
I don't know anybody who really enjoys it.
Yeah.
Unless in a kind of guilty pleasure sort of a way. But yeah, I believe that those were their 3 biggest budget films, and not one of them, on paper, made money.
So this one didn't make any money then?
If what I read is to be believed, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Canon Films were a funny one. They were always a really low-budget studio. And don't quote me on this, but if I remember rightly, they ran into financial difficulties, I believe, in the early 80s. And that's when they were taken over or bought by Golan and Globus, who were 2, I think, Israeli chaps,
right,
who were super into films, really enthusiastic, and kind of helped to breathe new life into it, albeit whilst pumping out like Corman-esque B-movies. And they worked with Hooper a couple of times at least, because I know Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 was also Canon Films. So I don't know. They have a history together. In fact, I think, if I remember rightly, Hooper had a 3-picture deal with them.
Right.
And this was one of those.
Okay, so it would have been this, Chainsaw 2.
And I want to say Invaders from Mars is the 3rd.
Interesting. Okay, so that's... The next Tobe Hooper film I think I'm going to watch is that one.
So it hasn't put you off all of them? You are planning on watching more?
Like you, I feel like if there's a gap in my film knowledge... You
have to fill it.
I have to fill it.
Wee.
Yeah, but I'm sure I'll get round to it at some point. In an ideal world, I would have watched it before we recorded this, but yeah, it probably would have not been on Prime anyway.
Somebody would have been asking for money for it, yeah.
Oh, no, he did The Mangler. Maybe I've seen
The
that
Mangler?
One. Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, that's got Robert Englund in it. Is that about a big oven that eats people? Involving a folding machine. It's a folding machine at an old laundry happens. Anyway.
Old laundry happens?
Yeah, I don't know what that means. Anyway, off topic. Yeah, sorry, I was just looking at his filmography. It's don't know, 28 listed on here.
Yeah.
Salem's Lot seems kind of interesting to me. I know that was severely carved up because I think that was meant to be a 4-part, 3-4 hour.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
So that was released as a miniseries initially. And then, if I'm right in thinking, it was later released, as you say, mercilessly carved up as a theatrical kind of feature film length. The miniseries is considerably better. And probably one of the best things that Tobe Hooper did, to my mind. Yeah. But it's vampires. I'm biased. It's great.
So taking it back to the beginning then, in space.
Yep, the best bit.
The spaceship in space.
In space.
Spaceship! Where's Charlie Day when you need him?
Which apparently the ship was intended to look phallic.
No shit.
Well, they usually are in sci-fi movies, but at least like they had the balls to admit. Bad choice of phrasing.
I didn't see any balls.
But they had the stones to admit that it was actually intended to look like a phallus.
Yeah, well, it wasn't very subtle about it, was it? It was 150-mile long spaceship. Are you talking about the space batship that was hiding around Halley's Comet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple, because there was another one that I read that was modelled on an artichoke.
Which also looks like a dick.
Definitely does not look like a dick.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
I don't
Have you seen an artichoke? Have you seen a dick?
I've never seen a dick. No.
Okay. You're a never nude.
Yeah. I thought you could tell by these denim shorts, denim cut-offs that I'm wearing. Spaceship did look very phallic, and it did occur to me at the time. I did think, that looks like a penis.
Honestly, the first of so many, I want to say thinly veiled sexual metaphors, but I'm not sure if many more of them were intentional or if I've just got the mind of a 13-year-old boy.
Well, do you know the film that I was thinking of almost constantly throughout this was Species?
Species? Well, yeah. Natasha Henstridge. Yeah.
Yeah, alien goes and fucks everyone and makes alien things. I don't remember that movie. I just remember there being a lot of shagging in it.
I can see the comparison, yeah.
Yeah. Did I notice any other sexual metaphors? Maybe as we get into it, they'll come back to me. But you say that there was meant to be more on a ship, which is interesting because I thought it was interesting when they went into the space penis and then they just see these giant bats floating around. And
they were great.
And I'm thinking, what is this movie? Are they aliens? Are vampires aliens?
Yes. Space vampires are aliens.
Yeah.
I don't know if in this universe actual vampires exist.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Well, they do call them vampires.
They do. And it was based on a book called The Space Vampires.
Ah, right.
Apparently the author hates the film, by the way.
Oh, it's a bit of a
Stephen King and The Shining deal, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe he'll commission a miniseries.
I mean, it's such a batshit concept.
Yeah.
That I would watch a remake. It didn't entirely work for me, this film, but and I think the main problem for me was there's just too much happening, too much going on.
Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I don't want to jump to the end or anything. But one of my notes was literally, it's an alien movie that wants to be a vampire movie that wants to be a zombie movie. It was just everything but the kitchen sink. Pick one and dedicate yourself to it.
Yeah.
There was too much. The central premise of finding humanoid creatures in space, bringing them back to Earth and unleashing hell, that's cool.
Yeah, in terms of concepts, yes, definitely, I would agree. Like, there's something there. There's an interesting idea there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massively. And yeah, I really enjoyed the whole succubus thing.
What does that mean? Succubus?
Succubus is kind of like a mythological creature, typically female, that sort of feeds on life force. Energy.
Like an emotional vampire.
Yeah, I know a few of those.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, not vampiric in the typical sense that we're used to seeing. So to me, like the creatures in this film are more succubus-like than vampiric.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was curious that they chose to call them vampires because they don't follow the typical rules either. Generally speaking, when you watch a vampire movie, they can go for a long time without feeding, whereas the rules here were it has to be within 2 hours until they like wither away and die.
Yeah.
Or become a husk and explode.
Yeah. There seemed like there were lots and lots of rules in this movie, and I didn't fully understand all of them.
And it didn't seem to play by its own rules all of the time either. Just quickly going back to the first act of the film, I have got a few comparisons written down that I want to get to later. But the sequence where they go onto the abandoned ship and find all the desiccated people, is it just me or did that give you like Sunshine vibes?
No.
Even Event Horizon, like just crew of a ship finding an abandoned ship with dead bodies on it and like
I guess
mysterious things happened.
It hadn't occurred to me, but I guess, yeah. there are also spaceships in those movies.
I meant more visually, aesthetically. Like, it's a trope we see a fair amount, or have seen since. I'm not sure I'd seen it before this, though. So I think it's really important to mention that Matilda May was largely nude for her entire 8 minutes of screen time. I only found out after we watched it. She was 18 at the time.
Oh, really?
But yeah, I think when I say it's important to mention that, like, as we sort of said at the head of the show, a lot of people seem to think really highly of Tobe Hooper. Even Patrick Stewart, who was in this movie, has said like many times that Hooper was his favourite director that he ever worked with. But so much of what I've read surrounding the production of this film just gave me big time ick.
Okay.
Related to the fact that Matilda May was only 18.
Mm.
Now, I guess the first thing to mention is that it was Hooper's insistence that she have no pubic hair.
Okay.
Which is weird, because if she's humanoid, why does it matter?
Mm.
You're just making her look younger, surely.
Yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, he said that in an interview that in the early stages of shooting, they waxed her pubic hair off completely, thinking it would make her look less nude. Don't know what the logic was there. In fact, it was worse because then her vulva was exposed, making her look even younger. So they had her grow a bikini strip of pubic hair back.
It sounds like a lot of unnecessary steps.
It does.
Because I noticed in a ship when you first see these three bodies, they do very strategically place objects in front of the guys' dicks.
I
you
know,
can't see
right?
them. Yeah.
This is what I mean when I say women don't have equal rights yet.
Mm.
Why don't we get to see space penis?
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Well, there was a big one. It was the spaceship.
Space phallus, yeah.
No, I did notice that actually while we were watching the movie, but you know, I'm not surprised by that because people are afraid of dicks even these days. So
it's weird, isn't it, that
Yeah.
there's such a censorship issue when it comes to male nudity, but the same rules don't apply to female. Although, having said that, I did read somewhere that they had to sort of film her in shadow some of the time to get around some of the censors' cuts.
Right.
But yeah, in addition to that fact, apparently Matilda May had to frequently remove her panties to allow Hooper to inspect her. Makeup artist Sandra Exelby talked about it in an interview. We had this big discussion about Matilda May. He said, I want all her body hair off. And I said, you can't do that, Toby. But apparently he didn't listen. Yeah, and there's a bunch of really inappropriate stuff that I keep finding. So there's something here that says, for years after the film was released, when asked what the first thing is that comes to his mind when someone mentions Lifeforce today, Tobe Hooper's answer was a very succinct and timid Matilda May. I mean, I guess a lot of people would say the same.
Yeah, but 18-year-old power difference, like, yeah, that's not cool, is it?
Yeah, and apparently she went on record to say that she was very comfortable with the nudity and didn't bother wearing a robe in between takes. But I don't know, man. A lot of people get a bit older and would look back at that differently.
What,
I
she
think.
said that at the time?
She said she was very
recently?
comfortable with the nudity, yeah.
At the time?
At the
not,
time,
not
yes.
now.
Well, I don't know about now.
Yeah.
But yeah, because she was described that it wasn't easy to look away for the cast and crew because she was, to quote, a gorgeous teen with an almost perfect figure.
Yeah, sounds very 70s.
But yeah, during filming of May's first scenes, there was a suspiciously high number of carpenters and set constructors present, so the remainder of her scenes were filmed on a closed set.
Yeah, no shit. It would just automatically be a closed set, right?
Well, these days, yeah, there would be
would
intimacy
now.
coordinators, there'd be all sorts.
Yeah, that sucks, man. Like, just the chippies on site going, yeah, come on, let's go on set and look at her.
Yeah,
Nah.
gross. Absolutely gross.
Should have been closed from day one.
Yeah, and one of the makeup artists, Nick Maley, averaged 70 to 90 hours a week during production, most of it applying makeup to Matilda May's fully nude body to make it look perfect and flawless, even though he admitted in an interview that her 18-year-old body was already pretty close to perfect. He joked once that he had no issue with applying the makeup. In fact, it was his favourite part of the job. It's so gross.
just lovely people all round in by the sounds of it.
Like, it's not just me, right?
Yeah, it does. It does sound, in today's climate, it does sound problematic.
I mean, he's not Savile, but,
No,
you know.
no, it's not what we're saying.
It's
but
still gross.
It's weird, like you just said about all of the crew coming on set. Like, it's just, we know better now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I wasn't alive when this was made. Was I alive when this was made? I was one when this was made. But not enough to know about what was going on in society and stuff. So obviously people always say it's a different time and stuff, and that's true, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a bit fucking weird.
Yeah. And I'm not trying...
18-year-old just left school and trying to get into the industry, probably accept any job. And at the end of the day, like, it's, if she's fine with it, you know, that's fine, and I hope she is. But yeah, as a general rule, I would say don't employ people to be naked if they're 18 and then go on record and say, oh, it was great, wasn't it, putting makeup on her.
Yeah, doing Vic Reeves thigh rubs.
Weird.
I think so. And I just thought it was important to acknowledge that, because there was so much of what I was reading about the production of the film that related to that. I couldn't not mention it. Well,
nudity is a very big part of this movie.
It is. It is. But female nudity, let's be clear.
Yeah, again, they're not showing any dicks in this movie.
But even the male space vampires were wearing like socks to conceal
on their feet.
Yes, on their feet. No, on their space
junk.
Yeah.
Right.
On their soft docks, to quote the film.
I wasn't expecting the amount of nudity that there was in this film, I must admit. I don't know if I was expecting anything in this film, actually. I think I was constantly surprised what was going on. I'm just scratching my head a lot going, what?
It's funny. I think going in blind was perhaps a good idea, because it does seem to have a bit of a reputation because of the nudity. So I'm glad I didn't know that in advance and couldn't sort of prejudge the film in any regard. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about Tobe Hooper knowing all of that. And when you kind of add that to like what he put Marilyn Burns through in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I don't know, I've heard a lot of actresses and actors that work with him speak very highly of him, but I always have pause, maybe, when I think about stuff like that. So who knows?
Well, he's dead now, so
but
we've got the last laugh.
Yeah, I'm not here to disparage the dead man's character. But yeah, he did also go on record and say the film is about men dealing with the feminine mystique or the feminine terror, as well as men dealing with the feminine inside themselves.
What does feminine terror mean?
I guess the unknown, because there's like the stereotype of men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Like, men never know what women are thinking. They're mysterious. That sort of bullshit stereotype, you know?
Yeah.
That's pretty outdated these days, but still being peddled by the Andrew Tates of the world.
Yeah. Okay. So it's about those things then.
That's what he says. Yeah. I don't know if that's what the author of the book intended or what.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I wonder what the intentions of the book were and what their issues are with the movie, apart from it not being very good. What it was they had an issue with.
Well, interestingly, the only quote I could find from Colin Wilson was he very much disliked the film, but he said, well, at least there's lots of full frontal nudity. So even Colin Wilson has failed us.
All right, fair enough. And she was only 18. Did you hear that?
Ugh. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That's not necessarily something that came across to me while I was watching. Obviously, there was sort of some kind of comment about gender.
Was there? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what this movie was about outside of space vampires come down and suck life out of people.
Yes.
And then maybe Picard does a shaky body thing and goes, oh, no, I'm a vampire now. Get out of me.
And says something about somebody who's been a naughty boy.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was my favourite line.
What was that about? That's right, because they were doing the thing where, and this is another thing, it's like, oh, they can swap between bodies now as well, can they? They're just, every 5 minutes there seemed to be a new thing, like, oh, now I've got to remember this thing as well. They suck life out of people. They have to do it every 2 hours. Sometimes they can transfer a little bit of their life force into you if they want to.
But then you have to feed every 2 hours.
But then you have to feed every 2 hours.
Or you end up a desiccated husk.
And maybe they want that life force back. But also they can transfer to different bodies sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they become Patrick Stewart.
One time.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, we think it's in so-and-so body, and it was an asylum. And Patrick Stewart goes, oh, he's been a very naughty boy, that one. Yeah, weird, strange dialogue.
Apparently that was Patrick Stewart's suggestion. It was supposed to be he's been bad.
Oh,
but Patrick Stewart suggested the word naughty as a replacement.
Yeah, I mean,
and Hooper was like, yeah, nailed it.
Fair enough.
Let's go with that.
He knows what he was going for.
It is it's very difficult to take seriously. Do you think it was intended to be taken seriously?
I hope not.
I get the impression it was.
Well, the things, sometimes if films are just very tongue-in-cheek, I can give them way more leeway because, it's meant to be silly. It's meant to be stupid. I didn't get that vibe from this. It felt very serious, actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Not satirical in any way, just played straight for the most part.
I guess so. That's kind of how it came across to me.
And it's particularly the delivery from the British side of the cast was very, very kind of austere and serious.
Well, I don't know what austere means, but I'm going to agree with you. But yeah, a lot of it is set in London, which also took me by surprise.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
No, and it's the astronauts were American, and one of them comes back.
Well,
and then...
it was I got the impression it was an American-British co-mission. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, and then one astronaut survives and then came after having
Coulson.
sabotaged the shit. Oh, yeah, how could I forget fucking Coulson? They say it about 85 times in a minute. Coulson.
Take a shot
Coulson.
Every time they tell him he looks exhausted.
Hey, Coulson. Yeah. Is that you, Coulson? I know you're there, Coulson.
Exhausted.
But I kept thinking she was saying Colton. And I was thinking of that it's not unusual to be loved by anyone. And I was thinking, I'd much rather be watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
At any time, day or night.
Well, no, I mean if the choices are Lifeforce and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Some of the dialogue was really, really strange.
Coulson.
And it kind of made me sad to find out that it was co-written by Dan O'Bannon.
Did Dan O'Bannon write the Alien movie?
He has a co-writer credit, I believe, for Alien. But the reason he's one of my favourites is because he wrote and directed Return of the Living Dead, which is one of my all-time favourite movies. Certainly my favourite zombie movie. Sorry, George.
I got some Return of the Living Dead. How dare you? I got some Return of the Living Dead vibes, actually, from some of the creature design in this.
Same. That was one of the comparisons I wrote down, actually.
Yeah. And actually, I would say maybe my favourite thing about this movie is some of the effects.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I was like, there were so many times where I was just close to nodding off.
Yeah.
And then Patrick Stewart would hemorrhage from the face and make a sexy blood lady. And I'd be like, I'm back in, you son of a bitch.
I completely forgot about that.
That was brilliant. There was so much about it that was absolutely batshit insane.
Yeah.
And it would always reel me back in.
Yeah. It was fascinating in a way.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it was kind of impossible to predict not necessarily where it was going to end up, because I guess either things work out or they don't, but just where it just felt like so many left turns.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about the blood demon.
That was my favourite bit.
Well, I was thinking it got Blade vibes from that, and the blood god or whatever it was, and Stephen Dorff turns into the wibbly wobbly CGI blood thing. But I think the effects in this are better than Blade. The dodgy CGI in that movie, but that blood stuff in this was done very well.
There was some really cool effects in this, really inventive stuff.
Yeah.
I think another one of my favourite moments was, I think either the first or second guy who's had the life force sucked out of him and kind of been vampirized.
The security guy or the
one
doctor?
Of them. And they locked him up. They put him in some sort of makeshift jail.
Yeah.
And the life starts to drain out of him and he becomes desiccated and runs at the bars and just explodes into dust.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
And then they're all just inhaling
human.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was some, considering what you just said about you didn't remember a lot of the film, some of it was actually super memorable. Chunks of it.
Yeah, no, I don't know why I was struggling to remember it, but yeah, there's so much happens. Maybe that's the problem. There's just there's so much being thrown at your eyeballs that I'm just get to and kind of like, well, that was nuts. I'm never thinking about that again.
I need to go and lie down in a dark room for a minute. Yeah. How did you feel about the dialogue? Because I think this, to me, just to take it back to Dan O'Bannon and his two co-writers, I feel like this was perhaps the movie's failing, was the script.
I didn't have any thoughts about it particularly at the time. I'm sure it was a bit wobbly, some of it. Yeah, I don't remember having any thoughts on that at all, really, to be honest.
There was a lot of dialogue that made me cringe inwardly and probably outwardly. But yeah, there's a lot of really dated dialogue as well. Like, there's one line that I wrote down saying, "I'm sure you'd rather be recuperating with a pretty nurse." That's just said apropos of nothing. Like, let's just make them sexist for no fucking reason other than it's the 80s and they're men. It was super weird and super, like, dated even in the 80s, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if he's making a film about, what did you call it? Feminine terror?
Yeah, feminine mystique and feminine terror. That's what he said. I
don't really understand. I mean, I do understand what they mean, but I can't get my head around it as a concept.
Yeah. I certainly didn't get that from this film.
So I'm guessing all of the creative decisions were kind of funneled through those fundamentals, but
maybe to sort of draw more of a line between the sexes.
I guess.
I don't know. Maybe we're giving it too much credit.
We're clutching at straws a little bit, yeah.
But yeah, some of the dialogue as well, like they, I don't know, it just made me chuckle. It felt a bit Garth Marenghi at times.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You did actually mention that while we were watching it, and I thought, yeah, you've nailed that.
Like they went full Marenghi.
I was expecting Matt Berry to pop up in a doctor's coat, yeah.
Is this hospital called St. Croc of Shit? But yeah, they say like observation window at one point, and that made just things like that made me chuckle, because that's so redundant. Surely that's like saying entrance door.
Yeah, all windows are observational
by definition.
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah.
And it felt like, is somebody trying to reach a word count here?
Yeah, it feels like there was oddly, like, it feels like a lot was crammed into this, but at the same time,
I have so many questions.
Yeah,
that remain unanswered.
It was just nothing, and by the time I'm kind of getting my head around a concept, another one comes along and beats me around the head, and I've forgotten what the last thing was. And maybe that's why I just have trouble recalling this movie.
Yeah,
because it was just crazy thing after crazy thing after crazy thing. And like I said, I just got to the end and was like, well, I'm going to wipe that from my brain. But then maybe because of that, it might warrant a rewatch if I'm very, 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 very drunk.
Or if you forget what it is and put it on by accident.
Yeah.
That's more likely, I would wager.
I
Give it 10 years. I
kind of remember a game on maybe the Master System called Lifeforce.
Okay.
And maybe for a time I thought that this movie was based on that, or vice versa, right. or something. Because,
but no connection.
I don't know.
So it still might be.
Well, maybe. I assume not, because what are the chances? Yeah, I definitely had that game when I was a kid, and then probably heard about this.
I'm sure you'd have remembered Full Frontal in a Master System game.
There was no Full Frontal. No, the pixels were covered up in that one. I think that was just like a space. You're in a little spaceship and you're flying through tunnels and space tunnels and shooting other spaceships and stuff.
That sounds great.
I don't remember there being any vampires. However, I am curious now, and I'm going to definitely Google that after, because imagine if it was like a spin-off of the game or whatever.
What were some of your favourite moments, if you had to pick any?
I think what you mentioned earlier with the blood combo blob floating thing, whatever that was.
I think a lot of stuff with pea stew was probably my favourite chunk of the movie.
What's pea stew?
Patrick Stewart.
Right, yes. Yeah.
That's what the kids call him, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those people, isn't he, where you put him in a film, like Clancy Brown, just improves things.
Yes.
I love him. I think he's great. He's an absolute legend. And he made me laugh in this. So yeah, he was my favourite character. And some of the effects I thought were very memorable and very well done. And really, that's my two favourite things.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite scenes was when he was strapped to the table and they were drugging him because they realised that he'd been taken over. He'd been used as a host of some sort. And it struck me that Patrick Stewart was in a green room and was also in the film Green Room.
Where he's a Nazi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great film.
Very good film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Punch a Nazi. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed that. And actually, there was a couple of moments during that scene and in that green room where obviously there's a lot of wide angle shots in this movie, but there was a point during that scene where I noticed the camera sort of turning. It was like, oh, we've got a Dutch angle going on. And there were moments that came so close to being brilliant. But for the most part, I find Tobe Hooper's directorial style to be quite nondescript.
Do you?
Yeah. Is that mean?
Like I said, I don't know much about. I haven't seen many of his films.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was pretty groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like.
I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm not saying that.
I feel like he's very experimental, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then maybe his kind of collab with Spielberg was kind of the perfect mix of that.
Yeah.
In some way, and maybe that's why it works for me. But there's a bunch of people that love his movies. I just think a lot of the ones I've seen are probably not really for me. And I think that's mainly because some of them just seem nuts for the sake of it.
Yeah.
A lot of just things that happen in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, obviously played for laughs, obviously not being serious. But I just was like, I'm not enjoying this.
It was almost a pastiche of his own film, in a way.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, if you're known for one thing, I understand why you would want to do that. And fair play, he did something different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There were definitely moments of greatness, but I feel like they were outweighed by mundanity. That feels mean, but I'm going to stand by it.
I was quite bored watching this, even though a lot of weird things happened. I was kind of looking forward to it ending, so I didn't have to think about it anymore.
A lot of things that really piqued my interest didn't get expanded on. Like, I would have loved to see more of the bat creatures. Show me more of that. That looks great.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know where they're from and why they're hanging around Halley's Comet.
I didn't find Steve Railsback to be a compelling protagonist either.
Who was that?
Carlson.
Right. Okay.
I found him
the
to be a
astronaut.
curious choice. I don't know. How did you feel about him? Because he disappears for like a lot of the first act and then reappears. And I don't know. He didn't sell me.
A little bland, maybe.
Yeah.
Not much to him. And maybe that was kind of the point, maybe, because I don't know. We mentioned earlier about Tobe Hooper really trying to get big performances out of people. He's felt very scaled back. Maybe that was a little bit of the point. He'd had some of his life juice sucked out of him, and he'd had some other life juice put into him. I don't know what was going on there. But
don't know the particulars.
Yeah.
We're not scientists.
I guess in a way it kind of just felt like he was kind of under a spell.
Well, he sort of was. There was that implication towards the end that she'd kind of chosen him and that he was, because she was like referred to as a world destroyer or a planet destroyer or something like that. But she'd kind of chosen him to be spared because she'd seen something of herself in him.
Yeah.
Well, that was the understanding I took from that.
Yeah, there was something along those lines that was said in the movie. And I was thinking, is he like, are we going to do a weird timey-wimey thing here where he, like, all time exists at once? Not necessarily that, but is he is he a space vampire himself and actually is igniting this in the past? And now I don't know what I'm saying. I thought he was going to have more to do with the plot and the setup of the space vampires than there actually was, but it just maybe was just a bit of throwaway dialogue. But maybe that was more stuff that was in the book that wasn't really touched upon. Yeah,
but I think that's sort of one of my biggest complaints about the film is that a lot of the more interesting aspects didn't feel fully fleshed out or fully explored, but they chucked in a bunch of extraneous stuff. Like, why did it need to be another woman? Why had she just fucked off to Yorkshire and got in a car with some rando? Like that, we didn't need that. There would have been another way to take us to Patrick Stewart, to take us to the asylum. It just felt stuffed to the gills with ideas when I would have preferred it pared back and have the few sort of core ideas be given a bit more room to breathe.
Yeah.
That's my biggest complaint.
Yeah, too much going on for me, I think.
Yeah. So towards the end of the film, obviously, we're getting to the climax now. How did you feel when it turns into a full-on zombie film? That was so unexpected.
I was quite happy because I thought, oh, well, this means that the film's nearly over. And yeah, again, just another thing that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Now they're kind of like zombies, but so one person has been turned into a vampire and then they have to suck another person and then they have to suck another person. Like, when does it end? It's just everyone sucking each other off for the rest of the movie. I would have preferred that. If you're going to do it, let's do it. Yeah, again, too much.
Yeah.
And I love like a apocalyptic zombie movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love all that stuff. I love the imagery and everything. But it was just another thing that was too much for this. Yeah, I didn't care for it. What about you?
There was stuff about it that I liked, but again, yeah, it was just too much. I agree with that. But there were things about it that really appealed to me because I'm a huge fan of Italian cinema. Well, Italian horror cinema, put it that way.
Fulci.
Fulci, one of the greats. But yeah, it reminded me of a lot of those sort of Italian or even Spanish American co-productions that was like half dubbed really badly generally. The acting's all a bit wonky. Production values are a little bit suspect. And it had shades of, like one thing that really sprang to mind was Nightmare City, which is an Umberto Lenzi film, which is absolutely full merengue and definitely deserves a watch if you haven't seen it. But yeah, there were definitely glimpses of that. Also stuff like Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, or Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, I think is its alternative title. But yeah, there was a bunch of stuff that really made me think of those kind of co-productions with the bad dubbing, and I would not have been at all shocked to see some dubbing.
Yeah. And
I would love to know if that was an intentional inspiration. But yeah, I did enjoy some of the zombie stuff. That was it was unexpected. It went in a direction I definitely didn't see coming. So props for that, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, there could have been a giant bird that had a giant space shit on somebody, and I'd go, that was unexpected. Didn't work, but I wasn't expecting it.
Fair.
Do you know what I was expecting, actually? Because just going back to the ship design, I noticed that 150-mile wide...
Are you going to talk about the coffin shape?
No.
Oh.
But put a pin in that. Yeah, at the end of it, there was this weird, like... It almost looked like talons on the end of it, and I thought...
Okay. Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I thought, I reckon this spaceship is going to, like... You know, I don't know, what's that movie? Oh... I can't think of the name of it, but I thought that the ship was maybe going to insert itself onto the Earth and start sucking the life force out of the Earth. I thought, and then it was going to like store all of the energy for the vampires to feed on the ship. So I was like, oh, that would be cool, and it didn't happen. I thought, oh, it's the one thing that didn't happen in this movie.
That hit the cutting room floor.
Yeah, maybe that's a result of the poster. Maybe there's some image that I've seen and that kind of led me down that path. But yeah, that didn't happen.
That's what Greta Thunberg is warning against.
Space vampires.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember that speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, coffin. I remember there being some coffin shapes. Were they doors or like
there
the
was
entrance to the ship or something?
Yeah, like right at the beginning, there was a panel that sort of came away, and it was the shape of a coffin, and that's what the astronauts came out of. And then they find the three humanoids, and they're basically in what could be described as glass coffins. So there's definitely a lot of death symbolism that has to be intentional.
Yeah, of course. What if they're vampires, you know?
Yeah.
Peter. I'd watch a Taika Waititi reboot of this movie.
Hell yeah.
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 Bring back Jermaine Clement.
Vladislav the Poker. So...
Nick, you're eating worms.
In summation, how do you feel about this film? And would you ever watch it again? You've already sort of touched on that.
I sort of said that, yeah. The only way that I'm watching this is if I've had a lot to drink and there's a few people over and you just want to have a laugh. Sadly, it didn't really do much for me. Mm-hmm. Reality is I probably never will watch it again, but I think that's probably the only scenario where I would, because I was, like I said, kind of bored watching it, which is crazy for me to think about, especially talking
remembering
about it now,
how much was going on
and remembering how much went on. I think it's not for me, this movie. How do you feel about this one?
I got more out of it than you did, but I'm inclined to agree for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know how keen I am to revisit it, but there was so much about it that was heaps of fun. And I can see why people really like it. I definitely can. But a lot of it just didn't work for me. I'd say like 50% of it really fucking worked. And then the other half was absolutely not for me.
Yeah, okay. It was a weird one in our lineup as well.
Yes.
Like thinking about the movies in our Alien series, obviously we started with Predator, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Arrival, Starship Troopers, Lifeforce, and then obviously we've got a couple coming up after that. But looking at all of them, and then they're all quite different, and we try to program our seasons so we get quite different movies and thinking about scheduling and stuff. But this one feels like such an outlier. It kind of sticks out when I look at the lineup now and think that's a weird movie, a weird choice. But I'm glad that it's done and we've got it out of the way. It's weird. I guess a lot of the films we've already spoken about are quite cerebral, apart from Predator
and Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers is not necessarily cerebral or thought provoking, but satirical.
There's more to it.
It's a satire and it's fun and it can be enjoyed on a few different levels.
Yeah,
and in that makes an excellent movie. This one I feel like doesn't have much to say in a sci-fi genre, and I think for me as well, sci-fi movies, when they're done really well, they are adding layers and they are about human stories. And even if you're looking at an alien race, it's really a reflection of us. And maybe they were trying to go for that in this movie, what you were saying about what did you call it? The feminine terror. Yeah. Obviously there was a goal there. It just didn't fully translate for me.
It didn't all land.
Yeah.
I would say watch it for the double entendres. There was a lot of that.
Yeah. So.
Do you want to tell people what we're covering next week?
I do. Next week, Ack.
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can stay up to date with us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at @STH_pod or support us on Patreon. Everything will be linked in the description.